Hi everyone, this is April Forts, the Iowa Department of Education, and I'm the State Supervisor for Mathematics. And this is the recording for the February 2017 webinar. And for the Virtual Coaching Network, we are going to look at Communicating Reasoning and Standards of Mathematical Practices 3 and 6. And so right now I'm on the Coaching Network website. So if you do not have this website, please send me an email and let me know. And so I'm going to go to the slides, and we're under the recording on the site. So when you get to the site, if you're on the main navigation here, then you can go over here to the left. And so you'll see right here is my email. So april.forts@iowa.gov. And so feel free to send me an email if you have questions. So I'm going to go back over here. So I was under the recording, and I had scrolled down to February and selected slides. And you'll see that our other recordings are up here, and April will be recorded after today and posted up there so you can get to the previous recordings. So previously, we've been talking about the support documents on the Iowa Core website under the summative and how that aligns to instruction. And even though it's assessment target information, our focus is always on instruction because we want to think about our classroom resources and how those are aligned to our assessment targets. And so we have supporting documents that give you lots of additional information here. And just as a disclaimer, remember that we are local control. So districts choose what they do with the information that I'm sharing. So this is just a sharing of information. And so if we go to the next slide down here. So we have been talking in previous webinars about Claim 1, which are content standards, and Claim 2, we did in January, which was problem solving, and that was standards for mathematical practices 1, 5, 7, and 8. So for February's, we're going to talk about Claim 3, Communicating Reasoning, Standards of Mathematical Practice 3 and 6. And before we get too heavily into looking at that, we have made an alignment guide, and we're calling it the Iowa Core Standards and Instruction to Assessment Targets Alignment Guide. And this is just a tool to help you understand the documents that are on the website. So if you go to our Iowa Core website, and what you would type in the search up here is you would type in iowacore.gov, and you would hit enter. And then it brings you to this page. And so you would select Educator Resources over here underneath the gray tab. And you would go down here to Mathematics. And scroll down, and then we would go down to Assessment and under Summative. And the reason why this information is housed underneath here is because as we were talking about Smarter Balance before the pause came, then this was the information that was just kind of shaping that conversation. Now, I will tell you that all of this information here is not solely Smarter Balance information. This information actually came from the content specifications that Smarter Balance did use. However, they're not solely for Smarter Balance. That was just the leverage that we were having that conversation around, because there were a lot of schools in Iowa that were interested in Smarter Balance with that conversation going on. And so we were like, hey, we can take a look at this information to help support instruction. So this is actually the content specifications that were done for the standards. And so you can see on this first page, it talks about who did that work. And if you scroll down further, you'll see under acknowledgement. And so you'll recognize several people who are experts in the field. And so if you go down to here, you'll see that Phil Darrow was a chair of the writing group to write the math standards. Additionally, he shared that responsibility with William McCallum and Jason Zimba. And now Jason Zimba is Student Achievement Partners in Achieve the Core, and William McCallum is Illustrative Math. And then Shelby Cole from Student Achievement Partners Achieve the Core, who is an expert in math. She's one of their top math specialists, and she understands a lot. So they did this work, And then what happened is then the assessment people then use this work to write the assessment. So I share this information because I want you to know that the information that I'm sharing with you came from this national group, and then they vetted it with 200 other individuals and organizations. So you can go onto the Iowa Core website and you can see that over here under our content specifications. And so that tells you where this information over here that we're talking about in these webinars came from. So when you go to, say, grade 3, and previously we talked about content standards and problem solving, and this month we're talking about communicating reasoning. So this is a little table of contents up here, but all the grade levels are set up the same. So there's a lot of information on this document, and you might think, well, I don't really know what all this information means. And so that's where we made the standards, the Iowa Core Standards to Assessment Target Alignment Tool. Now, remember that I will just go through this information, but feel free to stop and pause these webinars as you need to look at different documents or to think about information or to have those conversations, and you can always go back and rewatch it. So I'm going to open up this Iowa Core Standards to Assessment Target Guide, and it's still in draft form. And so if you find the occasional edit, let me know. You'll see that people are in here looking at this. And so as you scroll down here, you'll see aligning the standards to the mathematical practices 3,6, communicating reasoning to assessment targets. And I'm going to jump down to here. And what this does is it tells you how to interpret and kind of use the information over on this page. So it says claim 3, communicating reasoning. Students can clearly and precisely construct viable arguments to support their own reasoning and to critique the reasoning of others. Claim 3 refers to a recurring theme in the content and practice standards, the ability to construct and present a clear, logical, convincing argument. For older students, this may take the form of a rigorous deductive proof based on clearly stated axioms. For younger students, this may involve more informal justifications. Assessment tasks that address this claim will typically present a claim and ask the students to provide, for example, a justification or counterexample. So in this claim 3, or in communicating reasoning, we're talking about standards for mathematical practices 3,6. So those are construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others, and to attend to precision. We will use claim 3, 3rd grade, for our example. So what it says is so this is your screenshot to kind of walk you through the information on the website. So you would go to the assessment targets page on the Iowa Core website, and then you'll get this shot here, which is what I showed you previously. And then it says open up the grade 3 targets defined, which was the next screen we looked at. And you can scroll down or use that table of contents until you see the claim 3, communicating reasoning assessed. So that was this information down here, assess targets defined A through G. And then read the descriptors, and it says that students can clearly and precisely construct viable arguments to support their own reasoning and to critique the reasoning of others. Step 5, notice that the assessment targets A through G for claim 3, communicating reasoning. So the first one is target A, test propositions or conjectures with specific examples, and it has a DOK level of 2. Target B, construct autonomously 12 I'm not sure why that said 12 chains of reasoning, and it looks like we have a typo, and we'll make that edit. That will justify or refute propositions or conjectures, DOK level 3 and 4. So here we have the DOK level stated. So when students are doing these, communicating reasoning, and they're doing target B, that's really getting students at that DOK level 3 and 4. Target C, state logical assumptions being used, which is DOK 2 and 3. Target D, use the technique of breaking an argument into cases, DOK 2 and 3. Target E, distinguish correct logic or reasoning from that which is flawed, and if there is a flaw in the argument, explain what it is. So DOK level 2, 3, and 4. Base arguments on concrete reference such as objects, diagrams, drawings, and actions. DOK level 2 and 3. And target G, at later grades determine conditions under which an argument does and does not apply. For example, area increases with perimeter for squares, but not for all plane figures, DOK 3 and 4. So you'll notice over here on this screen that this is the information right here. And I know I'm going to have to fix that little 12 there. Not sure why it's there. Step 6, attention to assessment targets A through G for Claim 3 are important because they are considered the primary targets for the Claim 3 category. So what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is when we have students communicating reasoning, we want students focusing on these targets up above, and that the content, we're going to embed that content into there. And 3 and 6, standards for mathematical practices, 3 and 6 are embedded when they do these things. So we don't have to specifically think about standards for mathematical practice 3 and 6 if we're thinking about these targets. Notice that 80% of the Claim 3 communicating reasoning questions will come from the content assessed targets. And what this is saying is that these are the targets that naturally lend themselves to communicating reasoning. So we should, when we're looking at kids communicating reasoning, that can be our focus. So it doesn't mean that we wouldn't do any communicating reasoning with the other content standards. It's just that doesn't have to be our primary focus. So that means the other 20% will come from there. And then it also says, notice your achievement level descriptors, Claim 3. So this is how we're going to measure if a student is proficient or not. Okay, and then it says, examples of Claim 3 communicating reasoning questions can be found at the end of assessed targets for content used during Part 1. So that's explaining the information over here. So you will see, and we'll look at some of these here in a moment. And then you get into Claim 4. So what I'm going to do is, using this 3rd grade example, I'm going to go up here and say 3rd grade OAB. And so if I scroll back up here to my targets and find 3rd grade OAB, and that's this target B right here, understand properties of multiplication and the relationship between multiplication and division. And I have 2 individual standards in there, but remember, when we look at assessing students, we look at assessing them from the target or the cluster level, because individually assessing students on all those standards would just, like, we would be assessing students all the time, and we all agree that would not be good. We want to focus more of our time on instruction. And so then when we open this up here, we can use the table of contents and we can jump down to Claim 3. And we can see some questions that are examples and this target or cluster. For example 1, it says, Marquis said the number you multiply, the greater the product. Then he wrote 2 times 8 equals 16. So that's 2 numbers, and we get 16. And now we're going to multiply 3 numbers. So 2 times 5 is 50. 50 is bigger than 16. 2 times 3 times 5 times 2 is 60. So 60 is greater than 50 is greater than 16. And it says, give an example of a product of 2 numbers that is greater than 2 times 5 times 5. So we're providing a counter example. And so the students could correctly enter for a possibility 7 and 8, which would give us 56, and then that would disprove. And so then there's another example here. So for those other grade levels, then what you can do is you can go out and say, I'm teaching 6th grade. And so I could go in and I could go down to communicate reasoning, and I could see, oh, it says 6 RPA 3. So I'm going to scroll back up here to 6 RPA 3, and let's see if we have some examples. And we do, so we can go down to communicating reasoning, And then I can see this example here. And so it says, Lila flew her radio-controlled airplane 500 feet in 20 seconds. She claims that the speed for her airplane was 25 feet per second during the flight. What assumption must Lila be making for her claim to be true? And it says that the airplane flew at a constant speed. And then this next one down here is another example. So you can find several of those examples. And then additionally, remember that there's also the standard-based grading rubric, which we talk about in the April webinar. And you can go into the practice test to get more additional. Also, as part of the coaching network, feel free to join one of the G+ communities. And also remember our summer PD that we have coming up in June around Principles to Action. So please email me if you have any questions, and have a great day.